Welcome to Lead Up, Leadership Gwinnett's podcast dedicated to showcasing initiatives that truly impact our community and the incredible leaders behind them. I'm your host, Logan Serrano, Leadership Gwinnett's Director of Marketing and Communications. Today, I have joining me Dr. Calvin J. Watts, the Superintendent of Gwinnett County Public Schools and Leadership Gwinnett Class of 2007 graduate. Welcome, Dr. Watts.
Thank you, Logan. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And I appreciate your having me for today's podcast.
Awesome. We're excited. So
Yes.
Dr. Watts is originally from the suburbs of Seattle. He relocated to the Southeast in the early stages of his professional career in education to teach in Gwinnett schools. He later moved back to Washington to serve as the superintendent of Kent School District. So we're delighted to have Dr. Watts back in Gwinnett, and we're excited to feature him on our podcast and to share a bit about his leadership journey and our great school system. We'll jump right into it. Dr. Watts, can you tell us a bit about your story as a professional educator and your journey with GCPS?
Absolutely, Logan. Thank you again for having me with today's Lead Up podcast. I will share with you that I am a Pacific Northwesterner by birth, born and raised. My parents were actually born and raised in the Southeast. So my roots are in the Southeast. My dad was born in East Palatka, Florida. My mom was born in Thomasville, Georgia. They did the second migration to Washington State. They didn't know each other, but there is where they met. They were married, and 3 years later, I was welcomed into the world. I was raised as a Catholic school student. My parents wanted a faith-based education for me, but public education was certainly at the core. My mom worked as a school nurse in Seattle Public Schools, and so I began to see what it was like to be able to serve in public education at an early age. My dad worked for Coca-Cola bottling company and was a builder and subcontractor, so he worked with his hands a great deal. And so I had incredible leadership lessons from the first days that I can remember. My parents taught me invaluable lessons of how to treat people with equality and equity before those terms were really meaningful to me, to treat everyone certainly with kindness and respect. And my dad would share, if it were the leader of a Fortune 500 company or a person whose conditions compelled them to live in a homeless situation, you treat them in the very same way. And with kindness and respect. And ultimately that led to my wanting to serve. And I think about my initial role. I was a graduate of Howard University and spent my time, and I think about the opportunities my parents instilled in me, which is to travel, to meet people, to learn how to exist around a table, as they refer to it. I now call it a circle. To be able to sit and share space and place with others who may share different opinions from, who may look differently than I do, or who may have different experiences. And that's where I understood the power and the promise of diversity. That it is a fact. The fact that two people can be in the same room and we're different. We can also learn from each other's differences and become stronger as a result. And that led me to actually relocate from the Pacific Northwest, always seeking opportunities that are very different from my own. So what was more different than the Pacific Northwest? Well, the Southeast. And all of my friends, when I began my teaching career in Seattle Public Schools, all my friends connected with me and said, "You've got to move to the East Coast. Better yet, you've got to move to Atlanta," they said. So I was single.
Atlanta.
I sold everything except for my books and my clothes. And I relocated in 1994. And 1 year turned into five turned into 21. And that's 13 of those years, as you mentioned, I spent learning and growing in Gwinnett County Public Schools, from assistant principal to associate superintendent.
That is awesome. I love that. Hotlanta. And I love
Yes.
hearing about your parents and the
Yes.
values that they instilled in you. That's just really incredible. What can you tell us about your Look, Listen, and Learn tour? What were some of the things that you heard or saw that stood out?
Yes, thank you again. The Look, Listen, and Learn tour is really just a rebranding of what I refer to as the entry plan. And the entry plan is what I began with to help people understand that I'm here, even though I've served in Gwinnett County Public Schools, and even though I'm returning to the state where I grew up professionally, and I will tell you that my wife is now back in the Southeast as well, where my
Okay.
mother-in-law gave me the Son-in-Law of the Year award. I have to reference that. But in terms of the entry plan, Logan, I have learned a great deal. I've seen quite a bit. I've learned that our students still need additional supports, that they've struggled, as well as the adults who are serving them during these last 18, 19 months. And what was also evident to me is that no matter how far we were separated, even though I was, for 6 years, I was 3,000 miles away from Gwinnett, and yet our experiences were frighteningly familiar because of the experiences of COVID and our pandemic. I recognize that staff were realizing just how hard it was to reinvent public education, the manner in which it was to serve our students, to address their needs, whether it was feeding them or teaching them or meeting with them or connecting with families, that this work is hard enough, even in normal times. And the fact that we were able to rise above some of those major challenges was just incredibly eye-opening, but also concerning in the fact that we still have gaps that we're going to need to accelerate in order to address fully the needs that exist amongst our youngest learners, as well as the adults who are serving them.
Yeah. Well, you certainly jumped on board during a crazy time. And I just really have enjoyed seeing the photos and seeing the stuff, some of the stuff that you're already out there doing. I remember taking the survey that was distributed to the community. So thank you so much. It's
Yes,
unprecedented times for sure.
that's correct.
I heard you once say that your goal is to reach and teach all students as if they had your last name. What does that mean to you?
Well, I will say this, Logan. I don't say that lightly, and I certainly take that statement to the fullest extent, and I mean it in the deepest and broadest way possible. My wife and I have 180,000 children. That's how seriously I take this work, and we have one whom we still claim on our taxes, right? And he is living his best life, becoming his very best version of himself in Washington State. The reality is, when educators, and I firmly believe this, Logan, that as educators, when we see each child and we see them as our own, that regardless of if anyone has had a child or a sister or a brother or a younger sibling, they automatically should be compelled to see this work again in a deeper, broader way. That I want all of our adults to be able to say that when they look at a student, that they first that they will know them by name, because that means that they've actually taken the time to get to know a student and to call that person by the primary identifier of that person's very being, right? That's the one thing that will identify them as who they are for the most part. Secondly, to know their student by face, so that every student knows that they are seen literally and figuratively. Especially, it's great when students see or families see me out in public, like at a grocery store, at Home Depot, or at a gas station, and say, "Hey, you look familiar. Are you?" And I say, "Yes, I am." If you're saying, "Am I Dr. Watts, our superintendent?" Yes, and I actually shop for food because I'm human and I eat. And so to be able to humanize one another, because that again allows us to become closer, and then ultimately, not just by name, not just by face, but by individual need and strength. And so when we know what our children's needs are, when we know what their strengths are, then we can help them reach their greatest potential, which is that finish line, which we want every child to reach and to exceed, so that they'll be future ready. It's not easy. It never has been, and even during these times, it's next to impossible. But certainly, when we see our children in that way, there's no other expectation that we should have for them but to be their very best version of themselves.
I love that. And as a new mom, I'm just really proud to be able to raise a kid here in Gwinnett County. And I'm a product
Yes,
of Gwinnett County Public Schools. So it's just
excellent.
really incredible. So
Thank
this
you.
next question is kind of a combo. What is the biggest challenge GCPS is facing today? And what is one initiative on your whiteboard that wasn't there 30 days ago?
Yes, that's a that's a that is a double question. So the biggest challenge right now, I believe, is quite frankly, it is the politicization of just the dimensions of difference that exist in our world. And I say that given I'd like to explain what I mean further. The idea of politics is not a bad thing. I've learned this in my professional development, my growth as a leader. Politics is, and I learned this from a leader, his name is Dr. Linton Deck, and he once shared in a session that I was able to be involved in. He said, politics is neither good nor bad. It's neutral, like the weather, like time, uh, but it's what we refer to when we think about it. It does get a bad rap when you think about what you see on television or what you read in the newspaper. But he said this, he said, politics is really nothing more, nothing less than power relationships. And
Mm,
the relationships that we have with the power that we either share or shift in a positive way, or when we are not using power effectively, then we might hoard it, we might weaponize it and use it in a way that is only good for my own personal gain. And that's the dirty politics conversation, right? That's really what that means. Again, neither bad nor good,
right.
but it's how we use it. And so what he shared is that everyone, whether it's your home, faith-based organization, the place in which you work, every place and space has politics. And those organizations that are more functional in nature, that can share and shift power reasonably in a healthy way, those are examples of high functioning organizations. The exact opposite of what he shared is those organizations that tend to hoard power and only hold it for a certain few and do not share it with all or the masses. Those are examples of uh, lower functioning or dysfunctional organizations. And he even shared with us examples of families. He says, and I remember him calling on me, he says, Calvin, tell us about your family. I said, yes, it's my wife, Robbie, our son, Devin, and our dog, Cole, a miniature schnauzer. And he says, does your wife have the power sometimes? I said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And he says, does your son have the power? And at the time, he was about 4 years old. I said, yes, when he's crying, he gets all the attention that he deserves and needs, depending on how we can address it. And what about your dog, miniature schnauzer? I said, absolutely. When he needs to go outside or he needs to come in, yes, he has the power. And then he paused and he said, do you have the power anytime? I said, well, the first 15 minutes of every first Thursday of every month, yes, even I have the power sometimes. But we've worked to learn how to share that power within our family in a positive way, and that's why we've learned how to become a loving, high functioning family. And I think we can all stand to do that very same thing in whatever organization in which we serve.
Mhm.
And that's how I see it. It's the biggest challenge, but it's also simultaneously the greatest opportunity.
Yes, totally. And I love that. I love the way that that's described as power relationships. That's pretty cool. I haven't heard that before. So, part of this Lead Up podcast is to feature the leaders behind our community programs. So, Dr. Watts, I have a few more personal questions for you.
Yes, sure.
What is one thing that you wish you would have known before you began your career in education?
One thing I wish I had known before I began my career. You know, I'm going to say this is one of those where it's not fair, uh, because I will say I didn't know I had geniuses as parents. Of course, I didn't refer to them as that, right? When I
Mhm.
was, because I just thought they didn't know anything
Right.
until I got the job, right? And I used to say, well, when I'm a parent, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say what you just said again until I got the job. And
Yes.
so when my wife and I became parents, I just recognized the brilliance that existed in what my parents were able to accomplish, how they were able to teach and instill so much wisdom and knowledge in me while as busy and productive as they were in their own professional lives and personal lives. And so when I think about that, the one thing that I wish I had known, I really did know. I just didn't recognize it until I became a leader. And I for that reason, I recognized when my parents taught me to, to understand the importance of traveling, to understand the importance of reading literature. And even though I didn't learn a musical instrument, but to understand the importance of relaxation and finding hobbies that you enjoy, because working is hard work and your body can only take so much. So you need to find an outlet that you enjoy. So I grew up playing soccer. I grew up playing all sorts of sports. I learned how to cook. I had to cook at one meal a week at age 13 because my parents made sure, they said, we want you to be able to take care of yourself so that one day you'll be able to take care of others. Now, they didn't say because you're going to have a family or because you're going to lead a large organization as superintendent. They didn't say that, but they didn't have to, because they prepared me for anything and everything. And I say that I can't say that I wish I would have known much more, because they instilled all that I needed to know in order to again, to be the very best version of myself. And I'm working to get better every day.
That's awesome. As a new mom, again, I am eating my words constantly, constantly calling my mom,
Yes,
dad,
yes,
what do I do? So
yes,
I
yes.
think that's great. This kind of leads into this next question.
Sure.
How do you balance life and work? Is it still soccer?
I was going to say, what is that? What is life balance sometimes, right? Right.
Right.
And I have to say, yes, I still kick the ball around every once in a while. Right now it's having, conversations with our son as he is talking about taxes and voting in another state and driving. It's finding new restaurants or places to visit with my wife, as she is now, back. She was living in Washington State for the vast majority of the time when I first re-entered Gwinnett. And so we've had a chance to get to know each other even in different ways now that we're technically now empty nesters. But that work-life balance, again, that is something that I probably took for granted in early stages of my career. But it's understandable now. My wife is in education and also understands the importance of this role. So we're able to connect. We have hobbies that are our own, but we also have hobbies that we share. And so it's become really a joy for us to kind of just experience this new challenge because it's an entire family obligation, this work as superintendent in Gwinnett County Public Schools. But it's one that's so well worth it. And we're enjoying this next chapter in our lives, and couldn't be more proud. My wife did remind me, she said, take this all in, enjoy it. Know that it's the hardest work ever. At the same time, she told me this about a month ago. She said, it is rare that someone can actually stand and look at their career and their current role and say that they've actually had the opportunity to serve in their dream job. And I almost, shed multiple tears. I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. And I'm grateful for every opportunity that
That's awesome.
I share. Yeah.
And what a cool new adventure for you guys. And Gwinnett's so great. You mentioned going out to eat. I mean, we've got tons of great places and food. It's just a really unique county. We're just really great. What is one thing that I should ask you that I don't know enough to ask?
Well, I would have said, what are the greatest lessons that your parents taught you? But you know a little bit more about that right now.
Yes.
So what should you ask me that you don't already know or didn't know enough to ask? You might ask, what are the favorite things that I like to cook? You might ask, where do I love to travel? Where have I been?
Yes.
Those are some things I might entertain if you were to ask me.
Okay, so my husband's Puerto Rican and he loves to cook. So we're always
Yes,
eating some kind of meat, usually pork, rice, and beans. And I
there
swear
you
we eat
go.
that every other day. So
Yeah,
what do you
yes.
like to cook?
So I will say I do have my Southern roots,
Mhm.
and I've taken on a lot of recipes that my parents passed down, like oxtails and rice, and so fried fish. We used to go fishing all the time. So fish and grits, which my wife didn't really know about, even though she's from the South, but it was
Yeah.
regional. So my grandparents were both from Florida, and that was much more of a staple there. But now growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I love all things seafood. So
Mm.
salmon is something that I will cook and prepare in many ways. My wife didn't like oysters when we met. Now she enjoys them in many ways.
Oh,
But
cool.
during summers in Seattle, it's very common to throw oysters on the grill and have barbecued oysters.
Wow.
So yeah, those are just some of
That
the
sounds
few things.
amazing. What do you
It,
season your salmon with?
so it depends, right?
Yeah.
So usually it can be something as simple as sea salt,
Yep.
or it could be some Cajun spice or
Yeah.
blackened seasoning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Blackened
those are
salmon.
my favorite. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to have to
Yes,
pick some up for tonight. That sounds amazing.
absolutely. Yes,
So, one last thing, how can your fellow Leadership Gwinnett alumni help you and Gwinnett County schools further your mission?
yes. Well, I think it's as simple and as complex as this, and it's it's really the two words and the first three words of the sentence. You mentioned one last thing, and I will say take out the word last.
Mm.
And if I were to ask and just really charge every member of Leadership Gwinnett, past, present, and future, to just think carefully, thoughtfully of one thing that either your skill set, your profession, your talent, your skill set, your talent, your treasure,
Mhm.
that role in which you serve. What's one thing that you can do that would benefit the life of a student or support and address the needs that an adult who is serving our students might have?
Mhm.
Whether it's resources that you provide to a school, whether it's time that you devote to serving as a mentor, or reading to a kindergarten class or a seventh grade class. You'd be surprised that middle school students still love to be read to.
Oh,
And I think that every member, I would like to, and we can call it, it's the LG One Thing initiative, right? It's
I
so
love
what's
that.
one thing
Yes.
that we can all do. And so if we all do that one thing that's in support of, and if you need, if listeners are needing, some thoughts or hints on how to, maybe they'd love to, but just don't know,
Mhm.
then there's a conversation that we can have. And so I look forward to that. And I would say that's how fellow Leadership Gwinnett alumni can certainly help Gwinnett schools and continue to make us not only great, but greater in that continuous improvement process, or simply put, it'll help us to keep getting better at getting better.
Yes. That's awesome. I love that. Leadership Gwinnett, the one thing. We
One
have to
thing.
work on that. We'll put some thought around that.
Can we
That's
do that?
really cool.
I appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. We would love to do that and support our schools. Well, we are all out of time today. Thank you so much, Dr. Watts, for spending the
Thank
morning
you.
with me and giving our audience the chance to get to know you a little better and to share some of the great things that our schools are doing. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next Lead Up podcast episode.
Thank you, Logan.